Welcome back, guys, to Just Deal with It. And today we have a very interesting topic, which is called cheaters. We've invited one of my personal friends, Susan, to join us and talk about her experience. And I'm going to let Shanae talk about hers right now. Go ahead.
Well, I'm really excited to hear Susan's story because you told me a little bit about it. But I think that when we talked about this topic, we just kind of wondered like what drives people to cheat. We also talked about why do they stay with them? Who are the people that leave? And it's interesting because a relationship way back when that I had, the end got weird, and I started just kind of putting two to two together. But really, Tam, because of you said something. I was like, I think this man cheated on his wife, and which is why he never wanted to give me the reason as to what happened with the divorce, which is totally weird because every other man that I've dated was like totally happy to tell you why he got divorced. And a lot of them would take, some of the blame, which I thought was great. But this person would not tell me. And I thought, oh my God, after you and I talked, I'm like, I think he was going to cheat on me. I think maybe possibly he had already at the end because we ended up not having sex at the end. And I was like, huh. And so, because of your revelations, Tam, I was like, this is why he
Yeah,
probably cheated on his wife, which is why to this day he was like bending over backwards.
he's still
I don't know
paying for
now.
it. Exactly. He's still paying for it.
Yeah, I don't even know now because it's been such a long time, but like I think he's still paying for it, which is why he was bending over backwards for everybody because he broke up a family, right? So I think I got scot-free lucky, but I'm excited to hear what Susan has to say because in my situation, I was kind of like, oh, actually, I have one more, which is interesting that I'll quickly say. This was real, like, oh my God, like 20 years ago. I was with the guy and I got an anonymous email. And I was with this guy for like 5 years at the time. And I got this anonymous email. It's like, oh, when you got your wisdom teeth pulled out, he was actually with me. And I was like,
He
who
knew
is
the
this?
details. Damn.
And I stupidly believed him because I'm like, well, there's this anonymous person hiding behind an email. Here's, this guy that I've been with for so long who's denying it. I mean, he finally acknowledged it like later. And I was like, but, come on. I mean, that's in your 20s compared to like, in your 40s, 50s, whatever it may be. Like, grow
An
up, people.
anonymous email before. I've gotten something like that before. I was seeing somebody. We were seeing each other for I'm gonna say about a year, and then I found out that he didn't have papers and he had a wife in Russia, and I got an anonymous email from another girl that he was seeing
Oh my
before he and I got
God.
together, and she said, be careful, this guy has a wife in Russia and he wants papers from you because he told
My
me." And I was just like, wow. And then I found out he was like sleeping around with all these other women because
God,
he
pigs,
was
I'm
trying to
telling
see
you.
who was gonna give him the papers first. So then I called him out on it, and the tears came. He just, like this man just all of a sudden became this little piece of shit in front of me, right? Like I was in
Ugh,
shock. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, you see this shit on TV.
I
You see
know.
these stories on TV, but you don't see this in real life. But
Well,
it
here we
happens.
have Susan, right?
Susan's here, and Susan has a story. Let me tell you,
Oh my God,
I
so
know
excited.
Susan for so long, and we've been going through this together. We've been going through all these emotions. So, Susan, please talk to us about what happened to you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you both for having me here. I've never done this before. This is pretty cool. But yeah, so what exactly, how about you give me like a little prompt here? Where do you want me to begin?
So, I'd like for you to start from how you met this man. In what situation was he coming out of a marriage when you met this man? Was he with somebody in a relationship at the time of your meeting this person? And how did the relationship begin? And then we could skip the 20 years, more or
Yeah.
less. We could go through that. And then we could go to where we are. I'm gonna say 2 years ago when it like officially really started, right about,
Mhm.
and where we are now and how you have been handling it and what's been going on.
Okay.
So it was a romantic encounter, I want to say. I actually met my husband in a snowstorm.
Interesting.
Drinking hot
I
cocoa.
was running out with I was actually married at the time to my first husband. I already had two children. I had a daughter and a son. And so I was running out in this snowstorm with my son and my niece because I was taking care of my niece at the time. And, we were trying to catch the school bus. It was snowing heavily, but, I wanted to get them to school. And yeah, the bus left us. We didn't make it on time. So here I am trying to stop cabs, right? And quite, I would say like at least five or six of them went by and none of them were stopping. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to give up and just probably not go to work today. But then there's one car, my last attempt, stopped. And yeah, there you go. This was the person. So, we caught a ride. He dropped us off at the school. Then I was so grateful that I didn't want to make him take me all the way to work. So what I did was I just made him take me to the train station. And I was so grateful that I ran into the store, bought him a coffee, paid him, and then gave him the coffee. And that's what I guess sparked the relationship from there on. Yeah.
But how did you exchange numbers then?
So what happened was that I asked him if he takes like regular passengers, like does he have regular clients? And he said that yeah. I said, okay, if it's okay, I'll give you no, actually I asked him for his number. That's what it was. I asked him for his number and I asked him, what is your car number? So
Mhm.
that if I need a car next time, I can ask for your number. And that's what happened. And I eventually started calling him because I had clients that I would transport at the time.
Okay. So now you meet this guy and you guys end up getting married. You're
Wait,
married.
hold on, but she's still married at this point. So you were
Yeah,
married. Was he
yeah.
married at
Oh,
this
that's
point
right.
too?
So I found out, yeah. So of course, I was honest from the very beginning that I was married, right? I was still living under the same house with my husband. However, we had already been separated. Although we were living together, we had already been separated for like 2 years. So when I told him that story, he then, right, told me that he was also still married and that he had been separated for 1 year and he had a son.
Was
So
that true at the end of the day on his part?
till this day, I mean, the woman wasn't living there anymore because, after we met and we were seeing each other for a while, I never, he always invited me to his apartment. So
Okay.
she wasn't there. Her stuff wasn't there.
Okay.
Like she was gone. Yeah.
So
Okay.
now we move forward 20 years, let's say.
Two
Mm.
And
kids later.
what ends up happening?
I mean, the relationship you know, sparked, right? I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I fell in love with this guy. I fell in love with him. I believe that he fell in love with me. Otherwise, we wouldn't have stepped forward that we both, wanted to formally, do things the right way. So, I got divorced, he got divorced. I ended up at the time I had a house. I ended up selling my house. I moved into an apartment and then from there we decided to get married. We got married and then we moved into Pennsylvania. We bought a house in Pennsylvania and we moved over there.
So the
Okay,
marriage,
so
for the
when did
most,
you start suspecting stuff? At which
yeah.
point, what was the pivot point in your marriage where you started suspecting that he wasn't being faithful?
I think that was like an ongoing suspicion on both ends. And I think that it started more on his end because there was a lot of like accusations. He was constantly accusing me, like there was just this jealousy rage, that he had. And I was trying to understand it. I didn't comprehend it. This happened like after we already had two daughters, and I started, I was in school. After school, I graduated, I started working. And I think that when I started going out, into the
Mhm.
field to work is when he realized that I guess maybe the kind of job that I had, that I had clients and sometimes I would be in people's homes. And he just started with the accusations accusing me of sleeping with my clients. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what?
She's in child welfare, just so we
Okay.
clear it up. She's in child welfare. She would go out on visits into the field to visit families and support children and families. That's basically how Susan and I met, actually, doing that job. So yeah, it sounds like he was accusing you of things that he was possibly doing, because that's actually a pattern with cheaters.
If I may, like, play devil's
Yeah.
advocate here, both parties entered having So, I mean, I could see where he's like, well, she's done this before. And you could be like, well, he's done this before.
Right.
So, I mean, not that that's like, gives anyone the right to do that, but I could see where he's kind of like, oh, is she actually at this person's house or is she
So
actually.
that could be one of the things, but based on the statistics that we know about people that cheat, a lot of the times people that cheat will be the accusing party because they're trying to cover up them cheating in the event where they're trying to put the blame on their other partner.
Right,
So they distract the whole idea of them cheating onto the person so that the person feels boxed in and is like, no, 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 you're the only
right,
person.
right,
See,
right,
I'm
right.
here for you. I'm here for you. And because that job is so overwhelming, because I know how
Yeah.
overwhelming that is, you don't really come out of that mindset. You're just like trying to justify yourself. You're trying to explain, no, of course I'm not doing that. What are you crazy? Like, that's not, you don't even think about, but what is he doing on the other end, right? Like, why is he accusing me at that point?
So, what ended up happening, Susan? So, we got the accusing going on, and
So, it gradually became, it intensified, right? With the jealousy rage, he was, now he wanted to check my phone. He wanted to know why I was coming home at 3 in the morning because he just had a hard time comprehending this job. I'm over here out there doing my investigations, 3 o'clock in the morning, taking kids to get, checked medically. The parents needed to be interviewed, and I'm tired. I'm coming home at
yeah.
3 in the morning, and I still got to get up the next morning at 9 in the morning and present myself in court. And
Ugh,
he was just having a hard time under comprehending that. But again, it just kept going, with the accusations. Now he wanted to check my phone. I didn't have nothing to hide. I was like, go ahead, check the phone, But when I think about these things and I reflect, it's like, well, what was I doing? Why did I allow that? But I guess it comes with the insecurities, right?
yeah.
And it was always about, I want to make him happy. I want to make sure that he feels okay, that I don't want him to suspect anything. I don't want him to be with that because then he was placing that stress on me, and there was just nothing to worry about. So I gave him whatever access he wanted. But then when I would ask for access on him, it was like,
Mm.
right?
So, proceed with the story. So then what so when did you what happened that you realized he.
So it was just up, it was, 2 years ago, right? After, having so many wonderful people around me, telling me, go back to school, it's going to be good. You're going to be able to move up, and, I was so hesitant, but he was also he was telling me, yeah, go back to school. Don't worry about it. I'll support you, this and that, and I confided in that. So it was when I started school 2 years ago, right at the beginning, from the very beginning, that September when I started classes, it was like, I want to say, around like October. Yeah. When it's starting to get cold out, I noticed that he was, coming home like really late. He would not, and I was telling him, why are you coming home so late? He's like, yeah, the schedule changed. And because he drives, he works for MTA. He drives buses, and he schedules can go like 10 hours, 12 hours, but he never gave me his schedule. I always asked him, well, what's the bus that you're driving? He's like, you don't need to know that. It's okay. It's just, I'm like, what? But he was coming home late, a schedule that he was supposed to be out by like maybe 10, 11, and he wasn't coming home till like 1, 2 in the morning. And these were things that I was just like, because I was so embedded with school at the time. I was so excited to start school, and I just wanted to focus. I wanted to start strong, and I was just kind of like ignoring those signs, I was really ignoring them just because I trusted him, I didn't think anything of it. But yeah, he started coming home 2 in the morning. On the weekends, it was worse. Okay. On the weekends, it would be like 3 in the morning. So, that's when I started picking up the signs, and I was kind of questioning, but he always had a good answer. Always had
They
a good
all do,
answer.
don't they, Susan?
I know. I know.
Okay.
So when did you how did you find out that this
Yes.
was actually happening?
So that same year, right? We're talking 2 years ago, right? So you know that the semester is from August to December, right? That right after the holidays, and his mother lived like literally like maybe 4 blocks from us, where every morning he would walk over there because she was the one that would always pack up his lunch, because she's home. She doesn't work. She doesn't, she's on disability, pack up his lunch, make him breakfast. This is a cultural thing, right? And Hispanics, this is how men. That's their relationship with
Men
their
are with their
with
mommies?
their mommies. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not
He's a
aesthetic.
mama's boy. He's a mama's boy. I didn't care. Actually, I was like, that's fine, because I'm not gonna get up at 5 in the morning to make you breakfast when nobody gets up to make me breakfast. I'm like, and I'm half Hispanic, but that's, yeah, we don't do that. But anyway, he would, go to his mom. So what happened was that he just all of a sudden told me, you know what? He says, I'm just getting tired of going back and forth, having to leave, having to get up extra early and have to go to my mom's. I'm going to take your advice, he said, because I had told him like a while ago, instead of, getting up early every morning, I said, why don't you just stay at your mom's, being that the way, I know, right? Why, I gave him like I gave him the free pass. But you know what? It was like, because it used to bother me that we used to get up at different times, and it was like, whatever. Point
But
is,
you trusted him.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I used to cater to everything for him. It was always about pleasing him, and I
Got
and he, he took advantage of that. He took advantage of that. But anyway, he was the one that said, you know what, I'm going to take your advice, and maybe I'll just stay at my mom's, and I'll just come on the weekends. And I'm like, because that was just like all of a sudden, and I said, so you took it serious? And he's like, well, I mean, I'm still going to come back on the weekends. And I'm like, okay, but she's like 4 blocks away. When you used to do that, that's when I used to live in PA and you were working in New York.
Right.
Obviously, that's why you only came on the weekends. But now we're here together in New York. So she's only 4 blocks away. You just can't. I said, I just said that out of, just saying it. I said, but I didn't think you were going to take it that serious. But he did. And I said, well, no, I don't agree with it. And he said, well, you know what? I'm still going to do it. I said, really? So you're going to do it because, and me telling you that I don't agree with it. And he did it. And so that's where it started. He would stay at his mom's from Sunday night to Friday. On Friday night, he would come home on the weekend. And everything was fine. Everything was okay. We were, like we were still sleeping together. We were still having sex. Nothing changed. Everything was fine.
Hmm.
However, that's when I started seeing other signs, like, have sex as often. When we were having sex, he was like very, you know, it was just different. Like I could just tell, I mean, I've been with my husband 20 years. I think I know. I
Mm-hmm.
Of
mean,
course.
like the erection wasn't there. It was dropping pretty quick. It was like, yeah. So, and I'm like, are you okay?
Excuses as to why they didn't want to have it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, and I don't know, Susan, if you, before you continue, if you would take this as a sign, but with my last boyfriend quite some time ago, we were getting a couples massage. It was like for my Christmas gift, and I didn't end up getting it till like wait months later. And they tell you to strip down. And so the masseurs were not in the room, and he's laying there ready. And I'm like, "Oh," and I pop over because Tam knows I'm like, very peppy. And I pop over, I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to give you a kiss." And I went over, and he goes, and he just like looked at me, started like, it's almost like if it was like, and I was like, and I didn't say anything, but I was like, why is he acting that way? You
Mhm.
know? And
That's a
I'm,
good point.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's startling us, like, I thought that
You
was
know,
weird.
Well, you know what this actually means? They're not professional cheaters. There's some people that are professional cheaters. They do this as like a sport. Like they'll be dating a bunch of people at the same
you're an
time.
Olympic.
Right. But this sounds more like they know it's naughty. You know what I mean? And it's kind of getting them off because it's naughty. But at the same time, he's at an age where it's doing shit to his body because he's not a 20-year-old anymore.
Yeah.
So now we're naughty and our pee-pee won't go up,
That's
you
No
know?
right.
pee-pee. Just
That's
say you don't
right.
don't get an erection.
There
Yeah.
you go. There you go. Let me tell you, definitely he was not a professional. That I can tell you. But yeah, those were the signs. Those exactly were the signs, where, I wanted to, because I was always the lovey-dovey one, and he would just, then he would follow, I would always be the one to initiate. He liked that. He always preferred that I initiate. He got used to it. He got comfortable, and that's the way he liked it. And, when I would initiate those little, hugs and kisses and stuff, that's when, and one day, I think this is where I realized something was definitely off. I asked him, I looked, no, we were laying down together. We were actually watching something. And he was just staring at me. And I'm looking at him. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Are you still in love with me?" That was off. I was
Uh-huh.
like, that question. And I looked at him and I'm like, at first I didn't know how to respond. So I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I was like, hmm. And I'm looking at him, and he was just really like I could just tell how serious he was. But there was something behind that question, definitely something behind that question. So I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, of course." And he
And you
smiled, and
were.
then he smiled, and then he smiled, it was like still not enough because he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "What?" And then that's when I questioned, "Why are you asking me that?" And I knew from there on because that's when he went to the part of, you know what, I'm gonna go to my mom's and that
Uh-huh.
question.
So, because I know part of the story here, I would love for you to jump into your investigation and what happened there.
Yeah.
Everything started because again, we traveled back and forth from Brooklyn to my house in PA. And right after that January that he decided to stay with his mom, it was the next month on February for around his birthday. We had already celebrated it over here in Brooklyn. He said, "Oh, because that week we were going to go to PA. That weekend we were going to drive up." And he said, "I just want to let you know ahead of time that if we go to PA, I'm gonna put on music and I'm gonna drink." And these are major triggers for myself and for my family because he's an alcoholic. He drinks a lot. He drinks heavy. He likes to blast the music, and then he's up all night disturbing everyone, with no consideration for anybody. And, it bothers us, and it really bothered our daughters mostly.
Hmm.
So I said to him, "You know what?" I said, "I don't think that that's going to work because my oldest daughter, she's a nurse and she works night shifts." And I said, "She's working this weekend. I don't think it's going to work." And he blew up. He was like, "It's always about them. It's never about me. I can't even celebrate my own birthday in my own house." I said,
Guilt
"No,
trips.
it's not about
Mhm.
that. It's the fact that I'm letting you know that it's not going to work out because she works that weekend. I mean, if you could listen to the music on your headphones or something, maybe that could be helpful." No, no, I want to put the music on. I said, "Okay, well then it's just not going to work out then." So he didn't go that weekend. And when I came back, that's when he told me that he was leaving and that we couldn't be together no more because I was always putting my first marriage children before him. That I was always
Oh,
doing that. I always gave them um
priority.
The
the
love and the attention that
privilege.
he
They
was
always
craving
had,
so
and
badly.
it was like that for years. There was always something, him against my two older kids. Meanwhile, I catered to his two prior, two children. No, they were always at my house. They were always, um,
Staying with you
under
guys.
my care. I went out. I went out for him and his family. But yeah, it was right then that I found out because then once he left, I thought that it was just a temporary thing. But after a few weeks went by and I told him, "Okay, what's the deal? Are you," he's like, "No, no, I'm not coming back." I said, "Okay, why?" He says, "It's just not going to work out anymore." I said, "Okay, so then give me the reason why." Tell me what it is. It's simply because you couldn't celebrate your birthday? Like, what's the reason? He wouldn't give me the reason. He wouldn't. So weeks went by. It was the end of February. And I said, you know what? And I had enough. So I went personally to go speak to him. I went personally to go speak to him. I confronted him and he was shocked. He was scared because I was waiting for him in the hallway. And he said, I said, yeah. I said, so are you going to tell me what's going on? And I read it on him. He didn't even have to say anything anymore. I already knew that something was going on and that he had, that he was messing with somebody. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, you're with someone. And he's just like, he was speechless and he couldn't deny it at that moment. There was just no way he could deny it. And that's how I found out. That's how I found out. I had to go and confront him. And yeah, he was already messing with messing around with somebody for months. He was doing it for months already. He had it all planned out.
Okay.
Not professionally, but he had it all planned out.
Okay, so I have a question. Did his mother know about this woman?
You know, at the beginning, to be honest with you, I don't know if she knew from the very beginning, but I think that it was just a matter of time that she knew. Once he moved in with her, I think she knew. I believe she knew. Because
Okay, so
she covers everything for him.
did you ever meet the woman? Did you ever talk to the woman?
Oh, look at the smile. It came out of Susan.
No, I'm gonna tell you. Look, I know that my job is I'm an investigator, right? I've even been called FBI and all this, but
I called you up, yeah.
I'm gonna tell you something though. Things happen for a reason, okay?
Yeah, I agree.
So I was not. I'm not gonna listen. I wanted to know who the person was. Of course I did. I wanted to know because I felt that she deserved to know that he was lying to both of us, right?
Mm.
But there was just no way I could find out. He did a he kept her in and he hid her and I didn't know who it was. But just out of the blue, my stepdaughter's mom, who lives in El Salvador, okay, because he's Salvadorian, she sent me a
So wait,
picture.
hold on.
Okay.
Stepdaughter, you're talking about his daughter.
His daughter. Oh, I have a wonderful relationship with her. Yeah. The daughter that I helped save her life. This girl
Little
came.
Okay.
This
stepdaughter.
I helped her come here with writing up documents in Spanish and in English because I had to translate everything. I helped save this girl's daughter. She was dying of cancer at only 14 years old. She had they call it the grandfather of the cancers because she had leukemia, the worst of the leukemia.
Ay,
I
ay, ay.
spent 2 years taking this girl to the doctors, to our private doctors, taking to all her appointments. I was even with her during the transplant that she had. Only me, not him, not
So
the
she really
grandmother.
owes you big.
Yeah, so we
Okay.
have
Wow.
a wonderful relationship. So her mother, right, which I also have a good relationship with because obviously, they were like super thankful with me. They were like, wow, you're an amazing woman and this and that. So I was like, okay, great. So she told me, Susan, you're not going to believe what I just came across. And I said, what? She goes, I'm going to send you a picture. So she
Amazing.
sent me a picture of my husband with his mother and the other woman. Because
Wow.
because when I asked him who's the other woman, he said, "Oh, it's just some white woman." I was like, "What does that mean?"
Some white
Is
White
he
woman.
woman?
proud of that? Is
Yeah,
that
like I was
something
like,
he's
"What?" Like I didn't even ask
is
him
he
about the
showing her off like a
nationality.
show photo?
I didn't ask him
Because she's
about.
white?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to, comprehend that. Um, so she sent me the picture, and she's like, this is here. She says, this is here in El Salvador. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. She's like, do you
So the
know that?
three of them took a trip to El Salvador together?
Oh my
Last
God.
summer. Yes, last summer.
You were still wait, were you still no, you weren't
No, no,
together then.
no, no. Back right no, because remember, we separated in February of last year.
But his mother's an
But
asshole.
his
I'm sorry.
mother was there in the picture. She knew that
Oh,
he cheated on me with her and went to El Salvador with him and her, right? So what happened was that she sent me that picture. I was like, okay, but I can't do nothing with it. I don't know the woman's name. I don't know nothing. And she found it on somebody else's Facebook
my
because
God.
his mother, my husband's mother, she has a lady over there that when she arrives, she helps her with everything. She's the one that cleans the house for her. She goes with her to the stores and stuff like that. That was the lady that took the picture and put it on her Facebook.
Oh my god.
So my stepdaughter's mother knows her, and she just came across and saw the picture. She was like, So that's how she sent me the picture. Okay. So I don't know anything. I just have this one picture. A few days later, I'm looking in my Facebook because I barely put anything there, but I just look from, here and there. And whose picture do I see? The woman came
People you may know.
up as a suggestion. I'm
Uh-huh.
not looking in her stuff because I don't know who this person is.
Yeah.
But her picture popped out, and I'm like, what is this? As a suggestion?
She's looking at her on Facebook. That's what it means.
Exactly. So I opened up her page and I'm like, okay. So me, of course, out of curiosity, I messaged her and I sent a question mark. She immediately responded and sent me a question mark. And I said, and so I was like, okay, what do I say now? But I said, and I can't remember everything that I said, but I know that I was just trying to get to the point of, do you know who this is? And she had no idea, of course. So I sent her the picture of my husband with her and his mom. That's when she knew right away. And she shut all her social media down. She was quick to shut it all down. Like she did not expect, that I was going to find her. And that's how I knew. That's how I knew her.
I'm
Oh,
like cringing right now in a way because I was in a situation where it was the other woman also. It did happen. And when somebody does that, that takes a piece of you. That's a, like, listen,
yeah.
it's not a moment I was proud of, but it was a very different situation. Nobody was married or anything like that. I was lied to. But regardless of the fact, I cannot even imagine.
And
This lady probably thinks you're out to kill her or some shit, you know?
well, like I said, we had our back and forth. I did tell her, you broke. I said, do you know that you broke a family? You broke a family. I said,
So
he's
this
not.
was online? This was online
This
when,
was
or
on
did you see her?
Messenger. Yeah, this was on
Okay.
Messenger. I said, you know exactly what you did. I said, you broke up a family. My husband's a piece of shit. I said, but you should have known, that. And she was like, no, I didn't know anything. She said, and anyway, that's the past. She goes, that was history. That was last summer.
Hmm.
And
He
I'm
could
like,
have totally lied, though, is my thing. It's like
yeah,
you just
he
never
did.
know what the story is that someone tells another.
He did lie
You
to
know?
her. He didn't tell her he was married. He didn't tell her. He told her later. He told her afterwards.
Oh,
After,
are they still together?
no, she gave him the boot.
Oh, good for her.
She gave him the boot. She said that he was too strict. I said, oh, so you're not with him because he's married and you broke up a family. You're not with him because he's too strict. I was like, okay, whatever
So
that
did
meant.
you? So you spoke to her on Messenger, and then did you see her in person? Can you tell us about what
I
happened there?
did. I did. Again, like I said, this is a small world. I'm not looking for this person. But my stepdaughter again was doing her nails. She called me. She says, Susan, you don't know who's here doing their nails right now. And I'm like, who? And she showed me a picture. Because she called me on video and she pointed to the woman. The woman's sitting right there
Oh my
looking at her.
God.
She's doing her nails and looking at her phone like this close because she wears glasses, but they're like, and she's sitting there doing her nails, and I'm like, I can't believe it. I'm like, what is this a test? Like, you know?
It's more of a
But
gift, don't you think?
It
I
is.
wish I could have that encounter. When I ran into, we were on the street, and my boyfriend at the time, I remember the whole ex thing that I told you about. His ex was walking across the street, and he like went out of his way to try to say hi to her, which was weird to me. And then he got like all weird. From that point forward, he got really weird. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? But it was weird how that happened because that's where things started really like, I'm like, two and two is not adding up to me.
mhm.
So Susan, what happened next? Did you go over to the
No,
salon?
I couldn't help it. I needed closure.
I love that.
I needed closure, and I did go over there. I did because my
Good for
stepdaughter said,
you.
"You need to come over here right now. You need to come over here right now." And I'm like, I said, "Okay, all right." So I went. I did go, and she was, my stepdaughter was there, and she was, with her daughter. And I said, "Okay, we're gonna contain ourselves. We're gonna be professional, you know." And I waited for her to finish. And when I knew that she was gonna get up, I went quickly to the door. And I stood by the door and she's still on her phone like this, like with her phone in her face. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, yeah, she's like really, really short. I was like, I actually felt bad. And I stood in front of her and that's when she looked up and I'm looking at her and I'm like, I said, do you know who I am? She's like, no. I said, okay.
She's like, do you know
Oh
who
I
I
my
said, are
am?
you
gosh. That's
sure?
You know.
I said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Take a good look." So I took my sunglasses off and I said, "Do you really not know who I am?" And she's still saying no. I was like, "I can't believe this." So I had to open up my phone, show her the picture again. And that's when she went like, you know, she's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Because she has like a very heavy accent. She's actually from Ukraine. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, calm down. It's okay. It's okay. We're just gonna talk. I said, I just want to speak to you. It's okay. I said, let's go outside. This is private.
Oh my god, she's like she's a therapist for the other woman now. And she's like, it's okay, let's breathe together. Let's go outside. You're gonna be
So we go outside and I said, she's just looking at me like she just doesn't know. And I'm like, it's okay. I said, listen, you saw how easy it was for me to find you. I said, I'm actually here to help you. Believe it or not, I'm actually here to help you and warn you. Because I could have been, and this is when I went in and I told her straight up, I said, I could have been a crazy woman. Do you know what's happening out in this world? Do you know what happens to women or men that cheat and the partner comes looking for that person? I said, I could have been this crazy person. I could have killed you. I told her just like that. I could have had a knife, a gun. I could have killed you. I said, you need to be more careful. I said, you got to understand that what you did was wrong. What my husband did was the worst. I said, he's the one at fault here. But you should be smarter because you're the woman, okay? You should be smarter and do your investigation before you sleep with a man. I said, because let me remind you, you were going to hotels in my car. He was taking you in my car. Okay, because you remember when I went to pick up my car at the hotel? I said, because
oh god.
he knew I had a tracker in my car. I always had a tracker in my car because I always used to, I used to like knowing where the car was parked. Because sometimes we would use each other's, we would borrow the
Right.
car. So
Plus you're going on
he
visits, you wanna
and
know where you are, just in
right,
case.
and he would.
That's the moral of the story. The great thing is that at least you got closure. Fortunately, like a lot of us, me included, end up having situations where the closure's not there. So I think you got the benefit of being able to trust the person that, was in.
You
So
did.
I'm glad that you got that opportunity.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I'm hoping
That
that,
was beautiful. Thank you.
yeah,
You, and we'll definitely have more topics. Maybe I wanna have you on again at some point. So
absolutely.
thank you. This was great. I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us today. If you have any topic suggestions for us, please write in the comments. And for now, till next Tuesday, just deal with it. Bye bye.
Bye.